Today on Quickly Quantum, Britain spent 12 patient years building one of the world's biggest quantum ecosystems. Could one Whitehall reshuffle put all of it at risk? Before that, in the headlines, a Chinese neutral atom quantum computer built to slide into a standard server rack. Israel launching a national quantum R&D program. A fluxonium qubit result claiming eye-watering fidelity. The Department of Energy quietly fixing a supply chain problem. IQM and Deutsche Bahn testing quantum scheduling on real train data, and Columbia physicists chasing a phase of matter people have hunted for 15 years. Welcome back to Quickly Quantum, your daily brief on the quantum frontier. It's Monday, July 20th, 2026. Let's get into it. Now, first up, a Chinese quantum computer that looks like it belongs in a server room, not a physics lab. At the World AI Conference in Shanghai, the startup Zhongqi Wuliang, a spin-out from the Chinese Academy of Sciences Shanghai Institute of Optics and Fine Mechanics, unveiled Qinghe No. 1, a neutral atom quantum computer, meaning individual atoms held in place by laser light instead of the superconducting circuits most machines use. It's built to slide directly into a standard data center server rack, no cryogenic cooling required, which matters because most quantum hardware today needs dilution refrigerators running near absolute zero and dedicated lab space. This is the latest in a fast-moving Chinese neutral atom lineage. It follows May's Hanyuan 2 and part of a broader push backed by a reported $17.5 billion National Quantum Guidance Fund to win on commercialization speed. Now, the obvious caveat. No independent benchmarks have been published for Qinghe No. 1, and at least one predecessor system already disputes the first data center ready claim. Call this a demonstration of ambition for now, not a verified spec sheet. Now over in Israel, the Innovation Authority just launched a 100 million shekel, roughly $27 million, National Quantum Computing R&D Infrastructure Program. It's a mid-sized bet from a mid-sized country, but Israel's punching well above its weight here. Startups like Kedma, Qualcomm, and Quantum Art have already pulled in a combined $152 million this year alone. That makes Israel a surprisingly active quantum hub relative to its size. And here's the timing that stings. This lands the exact same week Britain's own quantum funding infrastructure is under political threat, which is basically today's main story. It's a reminder that you don't need to be a superpower to stake a real claim in quantum. You just need consistent funding and a clear plan, which is precisely what's now up for debate in London. Now, on the hardware side, researchers at 1QBit report optimized single qubit gate fidelities of 99.99% for fluxonium qubits. That's 4 nines, about as clean as gate fidelities get talked about, using single flux quantum control, a way of driving qubits with fast, low-power superconducting pulses paired with inductive coupling. They saw 99.9% with capacitive coupling instead. Fluxonium is one of the leading contenders to eventually replace the transmon qubits most superconducting machines use today because it holds onto its quantum state, its coherence, longer. And single flux quantum control matters because it could let the classical control electronics inside the cryostat scale up right alongside the qubits, one of the nastier bottlenecks in building bigger machines. Now, the important caveat, this is a simulation and optimization result demonstrating gate design, not yet a full experimental hardware demonstration at that number, and it comes from a single source we haven't independently corroborated yet. Leakage, where a qubit slips out of its intended 2-level state, remains the dominant error source to watch. Now, a supply chain story that sounds boring until you realize why it matters. Oak Ridge National Laboratory announced it's produced isotopically purified silane and germane, gases used to grow silicon and germanium for chips, at least 100 times more depleted of noise-inducing isotopes than what's commercially available today. Isotopic purity directly affects how long qubits hold their state in several leading hardware platforms, so cleaner starting material means better coherence downstream. It's also a national security play aimed at building a domestic U.S. supply chain for quantum-grade materials under the CHIPS Act framework, cutting reliance on foreign isotope suppliers. Think of it as the quantum equivalent of securing your own raw material pipeline before you're dependent on someone else's. Not flashy, but this is the unglamorous infrastructure work that ends up mattering more than any single headline chip announcement. Now, one of the more concrete near-term use cases we've seen this year, IQM Quantum Computers and Deutsche Bahn, Germany's national rail operator, demonstrated a quantum algorithm for railway scheduling, tested against real operational data rather than a tidy synthetic benchmark. Rail scheduling is a classic combinatorial optimization problem. Thousands of trains, tracks, and time slots all competing for the same resources, and it's exactly the kind of headache quantum and quantum-inspired approaches have targeted for years. Using live Deutsche Bahn data gives this demo more real-world credibility than the typical vendor proof of concept splashed across a press release. Now, the honest caveat, it's still unclear whether the quantum algorithm actually beat the best classical solvers on a problem this size, and that's the question that decides whether this is a genuine breakthrough or just a nice pilot. Now, our last quick hit takes us into some genuinely deep physics. A Columbia-led team reported magnetic signatures consistent with a fractional topological insulator, a theoretically predicted phase of quantum matter researchers have chased for roughly 15 years, observed in twisted bilayer molybdenum ditelluride. Why care? States like this host exotic quasi-particle behavior, particles that don't act like ordinary electrons, that could eventually underpin more robust, topologically protected qubits, ones that resist errors through their own geometry rather than needing constant correction. 15 years is a long time to chase a phase of matter, and the researchers themselves are careful to call this a candidate and putative observation based on magnetic signatures, not a definitive confirmation. 15 years of patient research chasing one physical result. That's actually a decent segue, because our main story today is about what happens when patient, decades-long policy work runs into a change of government overnight. Our main story today, and I'm calling it the reorg that could cost Britain its quantum decade. Andy Burnham was sworn in as the UK's Prime Minister today, and before he's even finished appointing a cabinet, the tech sector is already fighting him. As first reported by The Guardian, Burnham has asked officials to drop plans to abolish the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, DSIT, the department that funds and coordinates Britain's quantum, AI, and broader research strategy, and fold much of it into a beefed-up business department under Jonathan Reynolds, with AI oversight reportedly going to Cabinet Secretary Antonia Romeo instead of a dedicated minister. Now, before you assume this is just Westminster reshuffling deck chairs, here's why it actually matters for quantum specifically. And it takes a little history. I promise it's fast. Britain's quantum program is old by tech policy standards. It started in 2014 with the National Quantum Technologies Program, backed by £270 million and 4 university-led research hubs, years before most governments even had a quantum policy. That funding environment produced the current generation of British quantum companies: Riverlane, Oxford Quantum Circuits, Orca Computing, Phasecraft, Quantum Motion, and others. The program survived multiple department shuffles through the old BIS into BEST in 2016 and moved into DSIT when that department was created in February 2023. Here's the part that's different this time. What changed in 2023 wasn't just the name on the door, it was ambition. The National Quantum Strategy committed £2.5 billion over 10 years and created the Office for Quantum inside DSIT, reporting directly to the National Science and Technology Council, which the Prime Minister personally chairs. That's not bureaucratic trivia. Quantum funding decisions currently sit close to the top of government, and a departmental breakup risks scattering that. The intellectual continuity behind the program has a name too: Sir Peter Knight, the Imperial College quantum optics pioneer who's shaped it since day one, chairs its strategic advisory board and helped craft that £2.5 billion strategy. Exactly the kind of quiet, long-term institutional expertise a sudden departmental breakup tends to scatter. And just last month, Science Minister Lord Valence launched a national quantum standards network with £10 million from DSIT, hosted by the National Physical Laboratory, meant to anchor UK influence over the international standards that decide whose quantum hardware the world actually buys. The money's kept arriving in serious layers: an April 2025 package worth over £120 million, and then in March of this year, an announcement of up to £2 billion combining new UK research and innovation funding with a first-of-its-kind procurement program aimed at large-scale quantum computers. And the companies riding on this scaffolding are at a genuinely delicate age. Riverlane, which has raised more than $120 million, runs its error correction system at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the US, and is targeting what it calls its megaquop milestone, 1 million error-free quantum operations by the end of this year, the scale where error correction starts letting quantum computers do things no supercomputer can touch. Britain's own investment agency counts more than 180 active quantum companies in the country, second only to the United States in both company count and private investment. That didn't happen by accident. It took roughly 12 years of stable policy to build, which is exactly why a departmental demolition nobody's even signed off on yet has so many people in the sector nervous right now. So let's get into who's actually saying what, because within hours of Burnham's swearing in, some heavy names weighed in. The backlash arrived fast, and it's coming from names who don't usually pile on to a governance story. Julian Harris, CEO of the tech trade body Tech UK, and Dom Hallis of the Startup Coalition put out a joint letter calling this, quote, the wrong change at the wrong time, warning it would, quote, send a terrible signal to a sector that is growing at 10% a year. That 10% figure is the government's own number for how fast this sector is expansion, which makes the timing look especially clumsy if you're the one drafting the reorg memo. Matt Clifford, who advised both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer on AI policy, called the plan, quote, a big mistake, arguing that a reorganization, quote, wastes time and energy that's desperately needed for the actual substance, at a moment when technology is both an economic and a national security issue. His conclusion, in short, Britain doesn't have 6 months to spare arguing about org charts. Ian Hogarth, who chairs the UK AI Security Institute, says departmental reorgs, quote, basically distract departments for a year and risk driving away exactly the senior civil servants you'd want to keep. A specific worry, not abstract disruption, but the actual people who know how the quantum funding pipeline works, walking out the door mid-reorg. Barney Hussey-Yo, a technology investor, summed up the counter-argument simply. Turning Britain's scientific capacity into economic power is DSIT's whole job, and if he were Prime Minister, that would be his singular focus. Not everyone in the sector is against the move, though, and giving you both sides is the whole point of this segment. Atif Syed, founder of Wutsano, called it, quote, a bold move, and said DSIT genuinely needs, quote, a serious overhaul. And a senior labor source, cited by the Financial Times, defended the plan from inside government, arguing DSIT, quote, has not been firing on all cylinders and needs to be, quote, mainstreamed into a broader department. So here's my read. The case for the defense. DSIT is young, formed in 2023, and young departments do sometimes need fixing rather than protecting, isn't crazy on its face. But the case against is specific and structural, not just vibes. The Office for Quantum reports straight into the National Science and Technology Council that the Prime Minister chairs, and that proximity to the top of government is precisely what a merger into a larger business department tends to dilute. Reorganizations don't usually kill funding outright. They kill momentum, clarity of ownership, and the civil servants who know which lever to pull. Quantum, more than most sectors, runs on multi-year patient capital commitments, the £2.5 billion strategy, the £2 billion procurement program, that assume continuity of oversight. You don't want the people managing a 10-year strategy spending the next 12 months redrawing their own org chart instead. Now, the important caveat, and it's a real one, none of this has actually been signed off. It's based on leaks and a Financial Times source, ahead of Burnham's cabinet announcements later today. So the final shape of any reorganization, and whether quantum funding specifically gets protected, folded in cleanly, or genuinely damaged, is still unconfirmed. Time for the hype check. I'd put this one at a 6. The stakes are entirely real. The money, the 12 years of institutional memory, the named voices weighing in within hours are all substantive. But the actual policy hasn't been finalized, so a decent chunk of today's outrage is aimed at a leak, not a decision. Watch what Burnham's cabinet announcement actually says later today. That's the moment this turns from speculation into fact. These threads, Britain's quantum funding, the global scramble to lock in sovereign quantum capacity, hardware fidelity numbers inching toward fault tolerance, are ones we'll keep pulling on this week, especially once Burnham's cabinet actually gets named. If you're finding value in cutting through the noise on this stuff, hit follow wherever you're listening so you don't miss it. This has been Quickly Quantum, an AI-voiced podcast created and built by a real human using today's cutting-edge technology. Nothing you heard on this show is financial advice. I'm Brian Lampert, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Take care.